A serial killer killed innocent wife of a detective. Even the police officers got frightened by his heightened sense of brutality. Everybody thought he cannot be arrested until a psychopath detective entered the scene on that particular day.
Focus. Focus.
Welcome back to Paramount Recapped. I don't have many subscribers, but your single comment is a ray of hope to motivate me.
Choose a lost soul.
The story begins in Edinburgh, where Abigail Mears is brutally attacked in her own home by a mysterious figure in a hood. She is unable to defend herself and eventually meets a tragic end. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Detective Dan Lawson is examining a crime scene. His experience allows him to quickly determine that the scene has been staged to send a message.
It's like someone's sending a message.
Haunted by his past, Lawson listens to an old voicemail from someone named Sarah, but is interrupted before he can delve deeper into his memories. He is soon shown photographs from a crime scene in Scotland that capture his attention. The case bears eerie similarities to one he worked on in Chicago 6 years ago, prompting him to join the local police in Edinburgh to assist Superintendent Kessler and Detective Chief Inspector, DCI, Glenn Boyd.
Superintendent Kessler, this is DCI Glenn Boyd.
As Lawson is briefed on Abigail's brutal murder, her limbs severed and arranged in a cross formation, he learns about Boyd's personal tragedy. Boyd's son had passed away a year earlier and would have turned 3 that day.
We lost him just over a year ago.
The detectives head to Abigail's home, where Boyd mentions that a key was found at the scene, but it doesn't seem to fit any locks in the house. As Boyd chats with his wife, Marie, over the phone about coming home for dinner, he notices Avery Thompson, Abigail's neighbor, acting suspiciously. Multiple neighbors had reported seeing Avery argue with Abigail before her death, making him the primary person of interest. However, Avery refuses to let Boyd question him without a warrant. As Boyd leaves, another neighbor, Miss Wallen, mentions that Avery had accused Abigail of throwing eggs at his car. Back at the police station, Boyd reports that they still don't have a strong lead, as there are too many differences between the cases. Lawson also expresses uncertainty about whether the cases are truly connected. That night, Boyd returns home, but, overcome by grief, sits in his car instead of going inside. Meanwhile, Lawson, after trying to contact his former partner Walker Bravo, drowns his sorrows in alcohol as he reflects on Sarah. Unbeknownst to the detectives, a young woman named Grace is attacked in a manner almost identical to Abigail's. Later, Boyd picks Lawson up to revisit Abigail's house on a hunch. On the way, Lawson tells Boyd that they can speak with Walker, who now lives in London, about the case. The conversation turns personal when Lawson asks how Boyd is coping with his son's death. Boyd admits that while he threw himself into his work, Marie struggled with the grief, which has affected their relationship. Upon arriving at Abigail Street, they spot Avery trying to flee. Boyd chases him down an alley and manages to stop him. When questioned, Avery provides an alibi, explaining that he was caught by a speed camera at the time of Abigail's murder. He also mentions that their argument was merely over her job as a dog sitter, which he found disruptive. Boyd lets Avery go and finally heads home. The next morning, Marie suggests inviting Lawson over for dinner. Before Boyd can respond, he receives word of Grace's attack and rushes to the scene, where Grace's limbs have been arranged in a cross, just like Abigail's. Lawson arrives shortly after and spots a bloodied footprint, realizing that the killer had left it as a clue. Under UV light, they discover the symbol of an Egyptian ink, the key to eternal life, at the crime scene. Lawson suspects they'll find a similar symbol at Abigail's house, but instead, they uncover a text marked with the case number from Lawson's old investigation in Chicago. Reciting a relevant verse from the text, Lawson reveals that the killer sees anyone outside their religious beliefs as dangerous, comparing them to ravenous wolves. While speaking with Grace's mother, Boyd learns about a man named Colin McGregor, an old friend of Grace's. Meanwhile, Lawson arranges to meet Walker. Boyd informs Kessler that the mysterious key from Abigail's house has no apparent connection to the case. When Kessler confirms Avery's alibi, Colin becomes their only lead, particularly because he owns a firearm. That evening, Lawson meets with Walker, who now designs security systems. They discuss the Abigail and Grace cases, with Walker agreeing to help. The next morning, Boyd tracks down Colin, but Colin refuses to speak without a lawyer. Later, Colin provides an alibi, placing himself at work in Manchester at the time of the murder. Kessler and Lawson observe the interview as Colin makes an odd remark, calling Grace a lost soul.
Choose a lost soul.
Later, Boyd, Lawson, Kessler, and Walker dig into Colin's background and his past connections to a cult. They speculate that the killer sees themselves as liberating their victims by ending their earthly lives. The discussion shifts to the Chicago case, where the killer had taken jewelry from each of his victims as a trophy. It's revealed that Sarah was one of the Chicago victims, adding a personal layer to Lawson's involvement. Meanwhile, Colin secretly watches Marie, who is home alone. At a local church, Boyd learns that Colin was recently dismissed for failing to follow the group's beliefs. When Boyd asks if Colin is capable of murder, he is told to leave. That evening, Lawson and Walker join Boyd and Marie for dinner. Despite the pleasant atmosphere, Lawson notices Walker behaving too familiarly with Marie, which prompts a discussion about coping with grief. Marie, frustrated, defends her actions by stating that people in deep sorrow shouldn't be judged for their responses. This leads to an intense but necessary conversation between Boyd and Marie, helping them begin to understand each other's grief more deeply. The next morning, Marie optimistically promises a trip to Italy once Boyd finishes his current case. At work, Boyd is determined to solve the case and bring justice to the victims. Boyd and his team confirmed that Colin's alibi for being in Manchester checked out, but Kessler wasn't ready to rule him out entirely. Meanwhile, a neighbor reported seeing a strange man near Abigail's place before the attack, and when shown photos, she identified him as Colin. The police moved quickly, catching Colin with the help of a drone after he attempted to flee. Held overnight for questioning, Colin was on edge as Kessler grilled him about his travels, hinting at eerie connections with the case's disturbing details. That evening, Boyd returned home only to find Marie missing and tragically discovered her lifeless body in their attic. Devastated, he was hit with a fresh wave of loss and fury, especially when informed that Marie's torso was later found in a local park, a grim development in the investigation. Despite Boyd's grief, his colleague Walker urged him to stay focused on the case. When Boyd confronted Colin, Kessler had to hold him back, with Lawson taking over the interrogation. Colin revealed he had met someone in London who spoke of an unsolved case, piquing Lawson's interest. He then shared a cryptic mission of helping lost souls, sparking further suspicion. However, due to a lack of solid evidence, the police had to release him, leaving Boyd livid. Later, Boyd met with Lawson, expressing his need to continue pursuing justice for Marie. In a show of trust, Lawson opened up, sharing that he'd lost someone close as well, revealing that Sarah had been his girlfriend. This honesty strengthened Boyd's resolve, and the two vowed to bring Marie's killer to justice. The next day, Lawson urged Boyd to consider the idea that Marie's lover might be framing him as the killer. That evening, they met with Walker to go over every detail of the case. Walker suggested the mysterious key found in Abigail's home might fit something of Colin's. Later, an intoxicated Colin was attacked by a stranger who stabbed him. By morning, Boyd discovered Colin was missing and, using the key, unlocked Colin's shed, ignoring Kessler's instructions to wait for backup. Inside, Boyd found a bloody carpet and Colin's body pinned to the wall. Lawson arrived shortly after, reporting Colin's car had been found in a lake, leading them to a hidden room in Colin's house, filled with detailed plans of his past and future victims. Surprisingly, there was no mention of Marie, and Lawson hinted that her murder might have been the work of a second killer. Lawson suggested they investigate the security firm where Colin had worked. While browsing its website, Boyd noticed a photo of Colin with Walker at a London convention and realized Walker might be the foreigner Colin mentioned. Rushing to Lawson's hotel, Boyd called Kessler to warn her. Meanwhile, Walker entered Lawson's room, where he found the laptop still displaying the photo. He tried to defend himself, claiming he dealt with many security firms and couldn't remember meeting Colin. However, Boyd's call to Lawson about Walker prompted Lawson to quietly arm himself. When Lawson confronted Walker with the jewelry from the Chicago case, he accused Walker of stealing Sarah from him, revealing his own hidden truths. As their conversation escalated, Lawson confessed to having disposed of Sarah's torso to conceal his jealousy over her affair. He maintained that he didn't intentionally arrange the victims' limbs in any specific way. It was merely how they ended up. He accepted his guilt, claiming that the 4 other victims were hardly innocent, linking them back to his own interactions with Sarah. The situation spiraled when Walker attacked, and Lawson shot him in self-defense. Boyd arrived just as Walker lay dying, still thinking he was the primary suspect. Lawson encouraged Boyd to end things for justice, but Boyd hesitated, allowing Lawson to slip away. Before his final breath, Walker revealed his love for Sarah, snapping Boyd into focus. Calling for medical help, Boyd searched Lawson's belongings, uncovering fake passports and a planned escape to Ireland. Realizing Lawson was the true mastermind, Boyd raced out, updating Kessler. Despite the chaos, Boyd was determined to catch Lawson for what he had done to Marie. Eventually, Lawson found himself enjoying a drink alone, completely unaware of the storm brewing around him.